oldest brother was born in 14, and Marianne in
15, and I was born 16.
And they moved in here in 17. Okay.
I was the third in the family, and I had an older brother and an older sister, both of whom were very smart. So here old straggly me, I was kind of sickly. I was small. My first nicknames were Teeny and Tiny, depending on who was calling me. There were 6 of us, and there were really 2 sets of children. My older brother, my older sister, and myself. And then there's a little waiting period. And then there were 3 younger ones to kind of help understand the difference. The 3 older ones went through a tragic mourning period with my father after Mama died, and the Depression came together, which was pretty horrible. And then the 3 younger ones down the road, things had gotten better, and the older ones had left home. And so Billy, Dolly, and Gertrude were really kind of raised as grandchildren. Daddy was able to indulge them. He had softened and didn't feel the heavy responsibility that he originally did when there were 6 of us and 4 girls.
My full name, Hazel Margaret Chitty. Hazel was the name of my mother, and Margaret was the name of one of her best friends, Margaret Dunsford Cheek. And I got the name Dolly as a nickname because I was the 5th child, and supposedly they thought I looked like a doll. So for a while I was doll baby, but fortunately we dropped that before too long.
I have no memories at all of my mother, who died when I was 15 months old.
Her name was Hazel Talitha Brown Chitty. She was stately, dignified, stately, feminine. Everybody loved her. She had a wonderful personality and disposition. My mental picture of my mother is sitting in a rocking chair. There were a pair of mahogany rocking chairs in the front bedroom, and she kept them on either side of the fireplace. And of course, we had 4 fireplaces in the house, and there was one in the big bedroom where we spent a great deal of time. And she would sit there and be rocking one of the babies, and it was a beautiful maternal scene. She loved blue. She had copper-colored hair. In the sun, it was just a blaze, red, golden red. But we all wanted red hair, and we've got it in the grandchildren and the greats. She was a lovely lady. Everybody loved her. She had a wonderful personality. And Dolly has Mama's personality.
My great uncle, who was my mother's uncle, Ammoni's brother, Richard Nathaniel Herbert Harsh, they called him Herbert, but also he was a major in the American Red Cross, and they always called him Major Harsh. That's what we called him. There was always a closeness, I think, between Daddy and Major Harsh. Evidently, after Mama had cancer of the breast and had Gertrude and became very sick, Major, who supposedly had a medical degree, and he told Daddy he would take Mama and the children to Michigan for the summer where it would be cool. And Marion was virtually her nurse. I do remember in later years, Marion has told me that Mama had been in a lot of pain, but that Major did not believe in painkillers.
She died in Walloon Lake. I remember when Mamie came out of the room, had gone in the room and wouldn't let anybody else in there. I remember when she came out and said Mama had gone. Well, I was about 13, 12 or 13 when Mama died. Well, I guess, yeah, about 12. and then Gertrude was a little over a year when Mama died. She was just a cute little, tow-headed, always tiny, and sickly, really.
Gertrude was born a big fat child, because I've got pictures of Mama with you. And I think after Mama died and all this attention and all this worry and everything is really what caused her to get sick.
Dr. Holloway would stop by here every night on his way home and check on Gertrude. And that's how sick they thought she was, that she just wouldn't make it another night, another day. She was just special, and I always felt like she was my first child because I had strong maternal feelings toward Gertrude. My father adored my mother. And after she died, he never looked at another woman. He would get calls, and his friends would try to include him in dinner parties, things like that. He had no interest in it. His comfort in this tragedy was being home and having us around him. And he was not a lovable man, but he gave us security. He was referred to as the Rock of Gibraltar. And of course, that's kind of what the house was called as well, because it was sturdily built, and it was a homestead.
And do you remember in the mornings what he did when he got up, if we were still in bed?
Oh, yeah.
He came in the room, he kissed every one of us.
Oh, yeah.
Good morning, before he came downstairs.
Even the visitors.
And they loved that.
He didn't know who was spending the night.
Well, they
how
did.
many people were in the beds. I mean, we just had people in this house all the time. My friends.
Yeah.
They all loved to come over here. There was so much going on, good food. And the pantry was like a little retail store. It was so full of food because Daddy would bring home things by the gross, by the case, and by the gross, which I think is 144.
It is.
And Daddy was the distributor for Kellogg's Food Company, which was out of Michigan. And it was a health food. It started off as a health food company. You probably know something. And Daddy was the distributor for Kellogg's. Well, he got the first individual pack cereal that Kellogg's put out. So one of our favorite things with us and our friend, we each would get a box of corn flakes, like so. And so that's what we'd eat it just like potato chips or whatever. And we all loved that after school. We'd come in and...
My father was Arthur Benjamin Chitty, born in Denmark, South Carolina. And it's my understanding that at about the age of 7, he moved with his family, first to Flemington, Florida, and then they went to Micanopy. I never knew the Chitty grandparents in Micanopy. They died before I was born. But the others, Amoni, who was Mary Annette Harsh Brown, and William Watkins Brown, had gone to live with my mother's sister, Aunt T, in Winter Park, Florida. And it was there that my grandmother died of breast cancer.
We had an uncle, a bachelor uncle, who was my mother's brother. And his name was Nathan Harsh Brown. And I think the hunky must have come from a corruption of uncle. And maybe one of us couldn't say uncle and it got to be hunky. I don't know. We also called him Uncle Nene. So he was either Uncle Nene or hunky. He'd sort of lost his home because he had been living with his brother and sister-in-law, and they moved to Oklahoma. And it was during the Depression, and so he came to stay with us for the weekend.
But he moved in with us really just for a few days, for a weekend, a week. And he, continued to stay.
And I can remember Daddy would sit at one end of the table and Hunky sat at the other end. They would call one another Mr. Brown and Mr. Chitty.
And he'd say, Mr. Brown, when are you going to leave? When are you going to find yourself a place to live? And always at the dinner table, because that's where we talk. And we would all set up this hue and cry.
We'd all, cry and scream and holler, we don't want Uncle Nene to leave.
And that went on, and he never left.
During this time, Daddy hired Hunky because there just were no jobs. He hired a lot of people, especially family people. Everything at the office was always very formal, and everyone was called Mr. And I think part of his saying that to my uncle about finding a place to live was part of his ability to tease, because he thought it was, to him, to get a rise out of everybody suited him just fine. My oldest sister, Mary Ann, whom we later called Mamie, probably after Auntie Mame, because she was a lot like the character Auntie Mame. She was a disciplinarian, and she also was very confrontational with my father.
She had a dominant personality. She loved to tell ghost stories, loved to scare people. She had very strong likes and dislikes. And I feel like I spent a lot of my young life, but never opposing her, I guess is the best way to say it.
Marianne was not only highly intelligent, but very practical, just a good businesswoman and artistic.
She was an artist, and she was drawing and making paper dolls and all, for us, and would sell them to me and to the neighbors.
They were watercolors. And she made men and women about this color and would cut them out, and then she would make them in such a way that she could make clothes for them, and they'd have little tabs. She would line them, she'd have a sale, and she'd do a whole bunch of paper dolls and clothes, men and women, and line them up on the piano. And we'd all go, and the price was be on the back.
In the talks I've had with Marion, she felt like she went to every PTA meeting and that sort of thing, but I think by the time I really got in school, she was mostly gone, and I remember Betty as being more of a surrogate mother to me. She was much more of a home person. Marion was, for those days, was a real career woman, and Betty was far more of the homemaker.
Betty was a wonderful role model to me at that time, as well as later when she got married, because she ran a beautiful home and was a wonderful caregiver for her husband and her children.
Betty taught me to sew, and for many years I made my own clothes.
I got along real good with boys. And of course now, as I told you, the house was always full of friends and Arthur Junior's friends, and so friends would bring friends. And so it was just a sort of a natural next move that somebody would invite me out, or just want to just single me out and go to walk to King Street to the drugstore, or if they had a car, go to the Colonnade, or go to a movie.
Betty dated a lot. Betty liked boys, and boys liked Betty. Arthur Jr. really had a blithe spirit. His feet hardly ever touched the ground.
He was, I guess I can use the word, on the wild side. That's a little strong, and it's not comparable what today it means in today. But for that time, we considered Artie pretty wild.
He always came up the stairs 2 or 3 at a time. He was a slight person, very kind, very gentle, had a good sense of humor.
He was born in 14, I was born in 24. So there was almost 10 years difference between us, 15 between him and Gertrude.
He taught me to dance. Early on, I can remember we started off, I would put my feet on top of his feet, and we would dance. And then the other thing I remember about my brother is that he was quite intellectual, but he would tell me things like, he would give me things like reading lists of books he thought I should read. They were always a little bit over my head, but I would read them anyway, and I probably didn't absorb nearly from them what I should have, but nevertheless.
Arthur Jr. Went off to school very early, when he was about 16, I think, and so he really was never home again, because after school he joined the Navy. it wasn't that Arthur Jr. just hated the grocery business because he loved people. He got along with people beautifully, but he just wasn't really that practical. I mean, he wasn't really interested in making money. He was sort of more spiritual than that.
Whereas Artie had been raised by our mother, and she always got the older children on a track of where she thought their talents lay. And Arthur Jr. was an athlete, Marion was an artist, Betty was a musician. Billy was about 8 or 9 when Mama died. And I don't really know what she would have picked for his natural bent. But he was always kind of getting into trouble.
Billy was a mischievous little boy. And he loved to, he was Daddy's favorite. And very cute little boy, so he got by with murder.
I think he went to the University of the South at Sewanee for 2 years, and then the war came along. He became a pilot, but he was stationed here in Jacksonville for a while because we had this huge naval air station. And he flew PB-2Ys, which were 4-engine cargo planes.
He was a bomber pilot and was in the Pacific Theater, had a very illustrious career, and wanted to stay in the service, and Daddy said he had to come back to grocery business, which was a terrible mistake because he just started drinking or continued to drink and became his downfall. He is the tragedy of the 6.
One of the things I do want to say about all of my siblings is because I was the youngest, I was probably fairly precocious, and I thought I should be able to do everything they did. And I wept bitter tears. I said, I am 7 years old and I have never had a date. And everybody thought that was really great.
Gertrude was feisty and very smart. I mean, just very, very smart.
Dolly put up with me. I was like glue to Dolly. How she could put up with me, because I tagged along with her on so many things, and her friends did not want me tagging along, and Dolly just couldn't say no to me, and I really did I would have made anybody else's life miserable, but Dolly just sort of seemed to take it in her stride.
Gertrude was probably the love of my life, and I'm afraid still is.
And we did go to Eastbrook together.
And I was up there for 5 summers from the time I was 8. I was with these old people. All the Harshes were very important. Now, Billy was up there several summers, but he hunted and fished all the time. And I had a pony and horses, and we had a swimming pool down in the valley.
I do remember being in Eastbrook. I was a thorn in her side because she had been there, I think, before I went, so she knew all the ropes. She had her own pony. She had her own buggy, and I wanted to have my own, and I was probably 7 or 8 or 5 or 6. I don't know. I mean, I just thought I ought to be able to do everything that Dolly did or everything anybody else in the family did. There was one horse that they let me ride named Molly. And Molly was a nag. There were a lot of horses up there, and some of them, she was a gaited horse, but nevertheless, they could let me ride her. Dolly rode one of the other horses that was far more unmanageable, but she could manage him. She knew the way, and we just went across pastures and down in hollows and would end up on a road. We'd have to go through a creek, and maybe had to actually walk the horses had to walk in the creek to get to the Baggett's general store. We always had, a nickel or a dime or something, and we could buy 1 or 2 things with this nickel and dime. And I do have a picture of me and Squire Baggett. I'm 6 years old because it was 1935. Dolly took the picture, and I come up to here on him. I mean, I'm above his shoulder, And I'm only 6 years old, and I wasn't that big a child, so you know how tiny he was.
In retrospect, it was just wonderful, and I met all of Major's brothers, all my great uncles, and a lot of their children. And Margaret's middle name is Harsh because I felt that I wanted to continue in my family, you know, that name.
Governor Martin, of course, he was probably Daddy's closest friend, John Welborn Martin. He was, I don't remember when he was mayor of Jacksonville, but he was, and my father was very instrumental in the political world and helped John get elected and so on and so forth. So they were very, very strong friends, Mr. and Ms. Martin. And then he became governor of Florida. And that was another story where he invited us, and we were invited as a family to visit the governor's mansion in Tallahassee.
The Cheeks were friends of Daddy's, but Papa Cheek, who was Joel Cheek, was from Nashville, and he had 8 sons and 1 daughter, and he was the originator of Maxwell House Coffee.
They became very wealthy. They were probably, at one time, he was probably one of the wealthiest people in the area, and built a gorgeous castle, English castle, Tudor style on the river.
It was well known that if Daddy had died, after Mama died, if Daddy had died, I would be given to the Cheeks, and Gertrude would be given to the Martins. And the thought of being separated from Gertrude was just so horrible. You know, I prayed every night that Daddy would not die so that we would have to go live with the Martins and the Cheeks.
This is from what my older siblings have told me, that after Mama died, and it was the Depression, and Daddy was not only facing his grief from losing someone he apparently loved very much, but there was a financial doom looming. John Martin took a paper sack into Daddy and put it on his desk in his office, and it was full of money, paper money, and he said, you know, this is, because Daddy had just, you know, was just about to lose everything. And John Martin was a wheeler and dealer. By that time, I think he'd already been governor then. And he just put a sack of money on Daddy's desk. Leon Cheek did the same thing. Leon Cheek said, I will back you in anything you let me know. And Helen Lane's father-in-law, father-in-law was president of the Atlantic Bank. I think he had started the Atlantic Bank. And he called Daddy on the phone and gave him, I think it was something like a $50,000 line of credit. Well, you know, this was just manna from heaven. But I do remember that that was the depth of the relationship between my father and those two men.
I wanted to say this about the Depression. This was a nice neighborhood and affluent, for the time. But during the Depression, people really had hard times. And I remember Daddy taught us, always share. If any of your neighbors need something. And I remember this lovely lady, I won't mention names, a widow I know she had a daughter, and I think there was a son, but anyway, we knew the daughter. And we used to take meals up the alley, very unobtrusively, but we'd take food out to that household. And Daddy said, don't ever turn away someone that comes to the door and is hungry. Don't give them money, but if they're hungry, bring them in. That's when we set up the table on the back porch, because Daddy didn't want them in the house.
Yeah.
So we always had plenty of food. There was always a cook, and anytime, and this house was marked. We had a lot of people.
Someone later said that they'd get off the train. These were the what we called hobos, but they were really men looking for work, and they'd left their families, and they would just get off the train, and they would come down Willow Branch, and they actually had markings for what houses would give them food. Now,
That's
do you
what we
remember hearing
heard.
that? I do recall that there would be men that would come to the back door and ask for food. And our cook at the time was named Ruby, and Ruby would fix them food, and I frequently would sit with them because it was exciting for me to have somebody, and chances are maybe Dolly was home, but I don't remember anybody else especially being around, but I would go and sit with them while they ate, and then she would almost always give them something to take, a sandwich or something to take with them.
Ruby and I became very close because I was assigned dealing with the kitchen with meals. This was after Mama died. So Ruby and I became very close. And I would go up after dinner at night with our first grade readers and teach her to read. And she learned to write. She wanted to write. She wanted to be able to write her name. And she wanted to be able to, what she called, I want to be able to back my own letter to my mama, Tina Thomas, who lived in Perry, Florida. And she wrote her mother every week and would send either $1 or $2, whatever she could save.
I remember that on Thursday afternoon she would get dressed to go to town and spend the night somewhere in town sometimes, and she would go down and catch the streetcar. And one day she went down to catch the streetcar, and I saw her coming back shortly, a little bit later, and she, I'm gonna cry.
Oh, girl.
She was covered with things like tomatoes and, these boys, and I knew who they were. I mean, later I did. And she came back and she was discovered. I was so furious I could hardly stand it. I said, you go get dressed and we're going back. So she got cleaned up and I went, and I never let her go to the bus stop again, that I didn't go with her. And those boys would drive by in the car. I knew them. It was Roy Coffey and Sterling Dutton, who later married one of my best friends. And, and I've thought later, and I would stand with her until she got on the bus or streetcar, whatever it was. But I remember thinking, just when I thought about this memory, I thought, today it would be a drive-by shooting. Then they just threw eggs and tomatoes, but they would do this to any black person that was standing waiting for a bus. And it was sort of like, this makes you eligible to join the group, because we had high school and junior high school fraternities and sororities. They were little gangs, but they were social gangs. But I'm sure this was an initiation of some sort for these boys. Oh, I cannot tell you how furious, it makes me furious today, but I felt so bad for her.
Marianne and Betty were at home for several years, and then Marianne went to the University of Chicago for a year. But before that, she and Betty would take their turns running the household. We all took turns. When they married and left home, then I became the housekeeper.
I was the first to get married, and married in Riverside Baptist Church, and the reception was here. Beefy used to come and see, he loved coming to our house. He became a protege of Mr. Cheek, and with his golf. Mr. Cheek loved to play golf, and so this is where the family connection sort of came in. Earl was a good friend of Beefy's, and they lived in the same neighborhood. He brought Earl by, and Earl decided he kind of liked me, so he would start calling me for dates. So Mr. Cheek was delighted that I was dating, because I was dating both of them at the time, that I was dating Beefy. And Earl was sort of moving into the territory.
I met Sam at a dance. He tried to get his date's brother to introduce me, and the date's brother wouldn't do it. So Sam introduced himself and then got my name and proceeded to call me. And that was in December, and we were married in September. I really wasn't ready to get married, but because I was having such a good time. But Sam was about 9.5 years older than I, and he had come to Jacksonville to set up and practice, which he had done.
As it turned out, Earl was ready to get married and Beefy was not. And I loved them both. I really didn't know that I was ready to get married. And so he kind of pushed the issue and said, I'd like to come speak to your dad. Earl came and talked to Daddy and asked if we could get married, and Daddy said yes. I was sort of stunned with all this. Happened very suddenly. And so we were married in March the 12th, I believe it was, 1940. 1940. So I was 23. Mamie, who couldn't believe that a younger sister would get married before she, and Robert Ballard, who I had even dated in Gainesville, some at the Beta House, and had introduced them actually. And he had, gotten serious about her. And so she thought this was the time. So they got married 2 months after I did.
I met Jack on a blind date. He was a junior in medical school. And the first date I had with him was for a pirate party that they had at the New Sigma Nu House, which is the medical fraternity, a big, gorgeous house on St. Charles Avenue. And that was my introduction to Jack. And so he was a very serious student, and I fell in love with him immediately. And the last thing he had on his mind, even when we got married, was that he was going to get married.
What I loved most about Sam was that he, to my detriment, he put the practice of medicine first. But I thought, if I'm going to marry a doctor, I want to marry a doctor that believes in patients and the people that need him.
Cooper said that my husband Jack said to him, when your mother proposed to me, I accepted, and it was the best decision I ever made in my life. Well, I didn't realize that he saw through all my subtleties. I thought I was being very subtle, and that he thought he had proposed to me, but obviously he understood that I had planned everything. We did get married in the 28th of December. I don't know how Betty did it. I don't know how Dolly was pregnant, was 8 months pregnant. Mary Ann lived in South Florida, and they did everything. We were married in December. By April, I was pregnant.
I had 2 daughters. Hazel was born in June 41, and the war was building up. I just had Mandy, and I remember Earl's, and I'd gotten back home, and I remember him coming in and saying, I'm going to have to sign up. And I said, oh, Earl, you've got so many good reasons not to go in the war. You look after 3 families. You've got a business to run. And I said, Daddy's in the food business, and you can always switch over to the food industry, which automatically, I'll never forget, he said, I could not live with myself if I didn't go to war and do something to defend this country. So he signed up, and I realized how dependent I was for really the first time, that dependent.
During World War II, all the guys wanted pinups. Then they wanted the hometown girls to look like cheesecake. It was, I don't know whether it's still called cheesecake or not, but that's sort of what you called it in those days. And don't ask me why. So I can remember that we would take pictures. We were in bathing suits or shorts or whatever. But what we did, and of course what they did when, like on a ship, like he was on, they would put these up all over their walls. But I understand from Hazel that he brought all of them home, all these pictures home with them, and there is a scrapbook called Earl's Pinups.
Down the road, after Earl had died, and Beefy was divorced at the time, he came and asked if we could get married, and it was a very hard decision. And he said, I'd like to bring you a ring. And I said, oh, Beefy, can't I continue to wear Earl's diamond? And he said, well, if we put it in a new mounting.
After I was married, I had 4 children, We moved to Vero, and Billy was in an automobile accident. So when he got out of the hospital, he came and lived with us while he recuperated. And of course, the accident was alcohol related. He wrecked a number of cars, and all of them were alcohol related. He had nightmares every night, and he would wake up screaming. In fact, sometimes he never woke up, but he woke up the whole house. And he would wake up screaming. And when I asked him about it, he said he just dreamt about kamikazes. He met his second wife in Houston. She was what we called stewardesses in that day, but she was a flight attendant. And I can remember he brought Nancy to the house, and I said, I must not have been more than, I was in my 20s. And I said, Nancy, don't marry my brother. I said, he will not. He's already been divorced. He's got 3 children that he needs to support. And I said, he's an alcoholic. And she said, I can change that. And I said, Nancy, I don't think so. I said, I think this is the way he is, and I wish that you would not consider marrying him. She married him, and they had 4 children, and they were later divorced. He died in Oklahoma City with this woman who absolutely berated us for being so unkind to our brother. I don't think she had no idea how many of us had tried innumerable times to help him and get him off alcohol. But you have to want to do it yourself. So the body came home, and we had just a cemetery funeral. I mean, just the siblings. And he was 48 years old and probably died of a massive heart attack. Then we moved to Jacksonville, and Jack went into practice with Sam Day, his brother, Dolly's husband. And we moved next door to Dolly. My house, Dolly's house, Betty's house, and they were 3, 7, 10 first cousins within a block. When we moved back to Jacksonville, Hunky and Daddy were living in Clark Chitty's garage apartment, which had the most treacherous steps you can imagine. We remodeled our dock house, and it had 2 bedrooms, a living room, kitchen, and bath. And that's where Hunky and Daddy spent their last years.
Daddy became very fond of Hunky and realized that Hunky had fit a place in his life as well as his family's life. I think they died calling each other Mr. Brown and Mr. Chitty. We were a singing family, especially from my mother's side of the family.
And silly songs, a lot of silly songs. Sing Toodle-em for us.
What is Toodle-em?
So one of our uncles.
One of my made-up songs, family. I don't know whether they made it up or not, but I've never heard it from anybody else. Toodle-em, toodle-em too. Have you ever heard of it?
We think somebody in the
Oh,
family.
come on, sing it. I won't tell anybody.
Okay, pitch it, Betty.
Oh, I can't sing anymore. I've lost my voice.
Don't you want to wait till this afternoon?
Yeah, let's wait.
Oh, come on, let's do it right now. Just
Okay,
the two.
toodle-um,
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 That's what he played on his horn.
Toodle-um, toodle-um, too. He played it from daylight till dawn.
Toodle-um, toodle-um, too. The only tune he could play. He won the heart of his sweet Mary Jane with his toodle-um, toodle-um, too.
You know what we want now.
Come clean. We don't know where it came from, but it was one of our standbys. We would have.
That was
How
great.
about me and my wife lived all alone in a little
brown
house we called our own. She
Gin and
I drank
rum. No, she loved gin and I loved rum. Ah ha ha, don't we have fun? Ah ha ha, you and me, little brown jug, how I love thee. Ah ha ha, you and me, little brown jug, how I love thee.